Thank you for joining us. You can find this episode and all our podcasts on the Albuquerque Journal website, abqjournal.com, as well as on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, and SoundCloud. If you enjoy our podcasts, please like and subscribe, and consider becoming a digital subscriber to the Albuquerque Journal to help us continue to bring you more content like this. See the show notes for a discount on a digital subscription. Thank you for supporting the Albuquerque Journal, New Mexico's leading local news source.
Hello and welcome to another episode of What's Bugging You. I'm your host, Chesley Elkins, and here with my co-host.
Yes, I am Brian Victor, and we are glad to be here with a special guest. But before we get to him, we want to hear a word from our sponsor.
Preventive Pest Control. Taking care of the pests you see and the ones you don't see. Preventive Pest Control. It's as simple as that.
We have Mr. Mike Swanson again with us today. Very excited to have you here with us.
He's happy to be here. Thanks for having me again.
Associate certified entomologist and pretty much an expert in many things, especially in the pest control related field, right? So
yeah, some of it anyway. Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to be here again to talk about bugs.
Yeah, if this is your first time tuning into the podcast, we like to talk about all things bugs and pest control related. And today we're going to talk about how to get a head start on the spring pest situation, some things that you can do yourself, some things that we can help you out with.
Yeah, Mike, is there, with the cold weather, it's cold today, really cold today.
It is freezing, but it's absolutely frigid.
But it's actually starting to get, into the months where we can start getting warm. We're going to start seeing some other pests come out, emerging and stuff. And what are some things come off the top of your mind that we need to be worried about?
Well, just like with anything, if you're a homeowner or even, if you're renting your place, prevention is so much more effective than trying to, reactively take care of things. And with bugs, it's no different, right? And so now is the time of year to start thinking about what can I do around the house to reduce my vulnerability for pests when it does start to get warmer, so you're already ahead of the game. Ants really are a big one. People really don't think about how much control they have over how ants can live around their yards. Primarily, the big one I see right now is, I don't know if you guys take walks around your neighborhood, but how many of my neighbors still have piles of leaves up against the side of the house from last fall? And getting rid of that is just a huge step in reducing the opportunity for especially the odorous house ant, which is our number one ant by a long shot. Reducing the harborage, capacity that they have because they love, hanging out underneath that kind of warm, decaying matter and just cleaning that up, cleaning up the debris you have immediately against the house is going to make it so much easier to take care of an ant issue if it happens, and also to help prevent them from happening in the first place.
Yeah, ants never, as far as I understand it, never truly go away in the winter. They just kind of hunker down, get a little, dig deeper, or get somewhere a little more warmth, and I know that they'll even be active if it's a degree above, day above 55, 60 degrees. They'll be active outside.
Oh yeah, I'm sure you could go to a house right now in Santa Fe where it's way below freezing, and if they've got radiant heat or an old brick floor, you're going to find ants. I mean, they're active year round.
Yeah, ants are one of those things that once they do become a big problem in the house, and they're finding their way in and found the cracks, and sometimes even can set up shop, in some of the walls and stuff, that it's really hard to give a lot of DIY advice at that time because you're going to need a professional most of the time and that stuff. We can really help out with that for sure and help people, but it's nice to know that if you do get ahead of it a little bit, there are definitely some things you can do on the preventive side to, like you said, remove those leaves and those opportunities for them to set up shop and to then move inside.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, and it's not just ants, right? Like, think about all the bugs that come in throughout the spring and the summer. The roaches are going to be active. It's like every February, one day it gets warm and it's like a switch is flipped, and you just see people who do winter applications of pesticide around the outside of their house. So there'll be a day in February where you'll find like 10 dead roaches on your driveway. It's like something triggers and they all start coming out. So it's better to be prepared and have that barrier out there versus waiting for them to start showing up in your house and then like, oh, I guess we better spray for roaches.
So for some spring cleaning ideas, I guess, when a day gets warm enough and you have enough energy to go outside, I guess look for leaf piles. I know I have a bunch of those in my house. Anything else I should look for or work on?
Stored stuff. Like, do you have a bunch of like old lumber on the side of your garage? How close do you have your like trash bags right up against the house? All those types of things that create sort of a warm pocket and a shelter not only from from the cold, but also from predators for all types of pests. Just get that away from the house.
And trimming back trees, touching the houses this time of year is also super helpful.
That's a great thing for ants all year round, right? So we have 3 species of ant in Albuquerque that are very common, and their primary mode of transport into a house is on tree limbs that touch roofs. And so if you just make sure in the spring you're starting your yard cleanup, if you have any branches touching the side of the house, just trim them off, and those ants don't have an avenue to bypass a barrier that you put around the foundation of your house.
Right.
Yeah, it's very effective.
So moving up from ants to something a little bit bigger, like roaches, what are some proactive things for them, keeping them out of the house?
Unlike some of these other pests, there's not a whole lot you can do that's not chemical related for roaches. I mean, certainly make sure you don't have like a lot of excess moisture. Have somebody, if you got a crawl space in your house, go down there, or have somebody go down there like at least once a year and make sure there's not like a leaking pipe, especially not a leaking sewer pipe, because that can really make the roach population explode. So just being aware of those types of things, but really just making sure that your door seals on your garage and at your front door and your back door have a really good seal on the bottom, because that's energy efficient. You're going to save money, and you're going to be more comfortable on cold days like this anyway. But also, that's a great way of blocking the roaches from even getting inside. Yeah, and screens, of course, on the doors. On the windows. Screens on the windows help for everything. Flying pests, the roaches, spiders, all that stuff.
Excellent. And one of the things we do, obviously, that helps out our customers a lot, and then is just there are pests in them themselves is weeds. Keeping the weeds down can help with a number of pests. What are some of the common pests that weeds will attract?
False chinch bugs. That's the number one. You remember that this last summer? The false chinch bugs were crazy. I mean, we got calls about it from end of June through at least through the end of August, and especially in Rio Rancho.
And people calling them all sorts of things. I have no idea. It's like, nope, that's false chinch bug. You got fleas all over my house.
I've got fleas. I've got gnats. Yeah. Gnats was the big one. We've got mosquitoes, and you get out there, and it's false chinch bugs. And really, I mean, every year there's like a crazy infestation in Albuquerque. Like if you've lived here ever any amount of time, you know that it's going to be something. It's going to be the moths, or that one year, I think it was about 5 years ago, we had grasshoppers, like it was a biblical plague or something. We get those like different varied types of stink bugs, shield bugs, but usually it's going to be false chinch bugs or moths. And this last year was crazy. So I'm hoping if we get some more cold days like this, it might help kind of ease down those summer infestations. But the false chinch bugs love the weeds, and so if you stop the weeds from growing, or using proactive herbicides, which is a great way for homeowners to reduce, the amount of bending over they have to do and picking up weeds. But also, if you don't do that, just picking up the weeds helps stop those pests in the future. And thinking forward about that is what makes it easier for most people to keep the bugs out versus like, well, I'm inundated with bugs. Now I guess we better call somebody to spray.
Yeah, now is the time you start spraying for the weeds.
Yep.
Pretty much, I think February on is when you want to put that good barrier down and prevent them from growing in the first place. As far as all the services we offer, for me, that's the most beneficial, because I'm not really afraid of ants or whatever, and my wife doesn't like them, but I hate weeds. And so I have an HOA that will find me if it's side of one weed. And so that's my favorite thing is I'm going to pull weeds. I love getting out there and having them sprayed and not have to worry about it.
On a side note, speaking of pests, what do you spray for HOAs? I don't say it.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things. It's good to remind people because the best time to treat for those weeds is before you see them, and so having a little forethought and foresight on those can go a long ways for sure.
And I think that's the whole point of what we're talking about today is like, don't think about what bugs we have now. Now is the time to think about what bugs you're going to have in 6 months, and you have control over that now.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, they can go to either call professionals like us, and we'll come and spray good pre-emergent for the weeds, or you can go to Home Depot, Lowe's, and do some research and find some kind of pre-emergent to get on their property for. It's awesome. Yeah, it cuts back on like we said on pests as well, right? And so it's a good thing to do.
It really is. It makes a huge difference. And depending on where you live in town, getting rid of weeds helps reduce your vulnerability for mice, because that's if you have a wide open space, mice are going to feel a lot less comfortable running around because of their fear of predators. So it makes a huge difference for a lot of different things.
We in an earlier podcast back before the winter hit, we talked about overwintering pests, and hit on those again, because this springtime is when those things are going to start coming out again. And what are some of those things? And
yeah. So the two main ones that I get calls about a lot, and you'll start seeing over the next month or two, is when these are, depending on how the weather goes, you're going to start seeing these. Number one is the elm leaf beetle, and they look about kind of like a ladybug, but a little bit more elongated. It's sort of a yellowish, orangish back with spots or kind of stripes, and those are really common all around Albuquerque, all around central New Mexico.
So what do we mean by overwintering, though? Maybe we should explain that.
So a lot of the life cycle for a lot of the pests that we deal with. So you have the adults. A lot of the reproduction goes on during the summer, and then as the fall comes, the adults will start to look for places essentially to go dormant. And our houses are a great place for that for a lot of these bugs. So they'll go and get into vents into attics. Even if you have a flat roof house, they can get into the ceiling cavities, things like that. And they'll just hang out in a sort of a dormant state throughout the winter. And then once the spring comes and things start to open up, that's their cue to get back out and continue the life cycle. And so you start to see these things emerging and showing up all over your house. And usually where we see them is on windowsills and so forth, because they're trying to get out to the where they see the UV. And so it makes it look like all these bugs are coming in the window and dying, when in reality what's happening is they've been with you all winter long. They celebrated, the holidays with you, all that stuff. And now they're just trying to get out, but they can't because the window doesn't open and they're dying on your windowsill. So it's a very common thing. So I think the best thing for people to do in that case is, if you see these things, just kind of shoo them out, vacuum them, because spraying doesn't make a lot of sense because they're kind of already out and about in your house anyway. And if they can't get out, they're going to die whether you spray or not. But it does make sense in the fall to spray for those things, and certainly start spraying around the outside of your house to keep that barrier going. But yeah, elm leaf beetles, and then also western conifer seed bug. If you've ever seen those assassin bugs on nature shows, they have like that long kind of a spear-like mouth, and they look a lot like that. And they're very common around here too. And they're about half an inch brown bugs, and those are super common to see on ceilings this time of year and showing up by your door.
You have anything to worry about from those?
No, not really. Not from those. They have cousins that can, the wheel bug is a really neat bug that looks like it has half
Very
of a
painful.
circular saw blade on its back.
Very painful bite, right? Or
yeah,
sting.
yeah. So those predate other insects, and so what they have is essentially like a piercing sword of a mouth, and they just jam it into other insects and start, sucking out their insides, and they can defensively do that to you. And imagine just a big, dull hypodermic needle getting shoved into your hand. Unpleasant.
Yeah, I think another common one we get is paper wasps, right? Mm-hmm. They're overwinter. They'll kind of go and hang out dormant, a gravid female, as you call it, somewhere up in your attic, and then come out and you'll see in your lights sometimes. Or
yeah, both homes. You can think about like a finished basement, which we don't have a lot of those here, but sometimes garages that are converted. We see it on my side of the business, on the commercial side. We see it a lot in temporary buildings. Think of like barracks at schools or at churches where they have those outbuildings, and you have a drop ceiling. They love hanging out in there over the winter, so that's a pretty common place to find them. And then they're just waiting for it to warm up so they can get back out and do their insect stuff all summer long.
It's just always scary. Someone sees a wasp flying around their house, think the worst always, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
They're just trying to get out. Yeah,
and mosquitoes to an extent do overwinter as well. You're not going to see them flying around as much. We have a new mosquito paradigm, as we talked about before here in Albuquerque, and I don't think that's going to change. But some people are still reporting seeing mosquitoes in December and January in their homes and getting bit, which is crazy.
Yeah, and we seem to have some it's not every year, but like somewhat cyclically, we get something that seems like a plague. And in the past, we get just like a huge amount of moths flying around, or sometimes grasshoppers. Any guesses as to what we might be getting this year, if anything?
This year, I think it's going to be beetles. I think it's going to be small ground beetles. I have no evidence to support this claim. I'm just going to try to mix it up because I'm tired of dealing with moths each year. But yeah, sometimes we get the little beetles that come in there. They're very attracted to the city lights, right? So you get, large populations of them flying in from the open spaces around town, and then they hang out on buildings by like porch lights, and then daylight comes and they're looking for places to hide, so they go underneath the doors. And that's kind of the way it works for the moths too.
Yeah, I found that people, when it comes to those moths, almost have just irrational reaction reaction to those, and I'm not quite sure what it is. Maybe
I think it's their erratic flying, right? It looks like they're trying to bombard your face, and then the dust that comes off the scaly wings, like people it's a big ick factor for some people. I mean, I don't know. I'd rather have a moth on me than a lot of other things, but you know, it is very irrational.
Yeah, and I guess when that happens a lot of times, it's at night as well, you know, and they've just been disturbed and they come down and stuff. But yeah, they don't bite you. They're not really gonna, you know, destroy anything or anything. They're not the type of moths that destroys like
they can't.
clothing or anything like that. But yeah, those are still big, dusty Miller moths.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? Yeah, it's literally the most dangerous thing it can do is drink like nectar out of a flower. But they freak people out.
So no chance of grasshoppers this year, or do you think there might be? Yeah.
If anybody knows, if anybody out there knows, and they can tell us, we may be able to compensate you for that level of preparation, because we don't know.
So a segment we got here sometimes is we'll have from time to time people email us questions in and ask some questions that they have for us they want to answer on the podcast, and one kind of relates to this a little bit. Someone asked, are there any natural remedies or plants I can use to repel pests without using chemicals?
Yeah, so we talked about it a little bit before, right? Like with reducing the harborage, with the leaves, getting rid of the leaves, getting rid of the weeds, making sure that your house is sealed up. But a lot of people want to know, like, can I put out peppermint oil to stop mice? Spoiler alert, no, you cannot. I mean, you can try, but I have not seen any evidence that that's effective. We get stuff like dryer sheets in between the mattress and the box spring for bed bugs. That also does not work.
I remember that works on mosquito repellent, though. I don't know if it's true, but
it does not.
Yeah,
it does not. It works great for softening your clothes in the dryer. So there's some things that are quote unquote eco-friendly, like people think about them as being, well, because it's natural, right? It's not some like derived chemical that came up within a lab. Right. It's something that exists outside, therefore it is safe. And I think that people need to be cautious with that, because that's really not true. So think about something like diatomaceous earth. The diatomaceous earth is essentially the ground up silica from diatoms, which are microscopic algae. So they die and their shells kind of filter to the ground of the ocean, the floor of the ocean, and they get mined, and that gets used as a pesticide. And really it's not a chemical pesticide like we think about. Right. It's just like really jagged, tiny little pieces of silica. And so you sprinkle some down, and say like a roach walks across it, and it cuts up their cuticle, so their waxy cover on the exoskeleton, and then they start to desiccate and they lose their moisture, and that's how it kills them. Right. So it can be effective in kind of niche areas, but I've seen so much where it gets misused, where people will see that a big bag of it and it says food grade on there.
Right.
And they're like, oh, well, there's obviously nothing dangerous with this. And they'll just pour, you remember those Looney Tunes cartoons where they would like take the barrel of gunpowder and then like leave the trail of it? It looks like that, but white. They're just huge trails of diatomaceous earth across their thresholds, around the perimeter of their rooms, and that's not effective. And it can be an inhalation irritant. People can develop kind of asthma-like symptoms from just huffing a lot of the stuff accidentally. So people need to be careful about things that say eco and safe and whatever, because that doesn't mean that it's safe in all aspects, right?
Right. I don't know if you remember the experiment we did on our own with diatomaceous earth at the office. We had someone brought a black widow spider in, and we also had I think there was a cockroach in there, and we actually dumped diatomaceous earth on it, and the cockroach, they're there for months. They didn't do nothing. Just sit there. Yeah. We were just covered in white. Didn't do nothing to affect them one bit. So.
Yeah, and I mean, for some things it can be useful. So like bugs that drag their bellies in the ground, yes, but again, there are things you can do that are as safe and much more effective, right? And don't have like dust covering your room or your house. Other people talk about using like clove oil, or you can buy over-the-counter pesticides that have like essentially essential oils as their main ingredient. And sure, if you spray an insect with that directly, you're probably going to kill it, but it doesn't have much of a residual effect. So you can't spray that around your house and hope that, sometime in the next 30 days, a bug's going to crawl across that and die, because these are volatile compounds that don't persist. So it doesn't really work that way.
And with some of those essential oils too, isn't there a danger to some non-target things, like maybe cats and stuff if they're in high concentrations?
Yeah, it certainly can be an irritant.
Yeah.
At the least.
Okay.
Yeah, and whatever you're using, read the label. That's what I always tell everybody, right? So whether you're using over-the-counter insecticide that you get at Home Depot, whether you're using like a essential oil safe thing, quote unquote, that you get on some website, read the label and use it safely. I mean, I think that's our obligation as responsible people, whether we're in the pest control industry or not.
Yeah, I think it's probably a little bit of a mental thing. If I'm outside, removing weeds or, making sure that moisture's not, accumulating next to the house, I'm not really doing that thinking about pest control, but I'm really doing something that's way more effective than, if I'm, using the peppermint oil or some diatomaceous earth and actually a lot safer, a lot better for the environment, a lot better for my health and more effective ultimately.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that being proactive about keeping these things that you don't want in your house, like seal up your house, redo your screens, think about your swamp cooler. That's another thing that a lot of people, I think, overlook is in the summer, you've got essentially a non-filtered blast of air coming in from outside all day long. And so things like false chinch bugs, a related species, the the elm seed bug, which look just like them, these things are getting just blasted into people's homes. And so if there's a way you can maybe do some maintenance on your swamp cooler to, make sure that your pads are fitted as properly as possible, make sure you don't have any rusting holes or anything in there. Just try to think about how am I introducing these things, not what can I get after the fact that's maybe not designed for this pest because it makes me feel good.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
And I guess as we wrap this up, I guess that's a good transition. Is I think the key point is now is act now before it's a problem, right? You can fix the stuff out of the yard, fix your screens, look at your swamp cooler, prepare now, and kind of get rid of the be proactive on the weeds, that type of stuff, to avoid having a bigger pest problem when in the springtime when pests are going to be more prevalent. When it's not too late, but in a sense it's too late. It's too late to do anything proactively at that time besides doing some type of pest control application. Yep. And so.
And even when it does come to pesticides, using a small amount as a prevention is usually probably better than having to use a large amount and trying to fix an infestation later.
A more intrusive amount, I guess.
Exactly.
People that come in your home and do things for you at that point. So.
And even just reactively, right? So I can't tell you how many times we get calls from people who have bed bugs, and they do happen a lot, both in homes and in businesses around Albuquerque and the surrounding area. And people say, well, we tried this and we tried this and we tried this, and now we're calling you. And if they just call a company at the beginning, at the first sight of them, realizing that you're not going to fix it with over-the-counter stuff, the amount that you spend will be less, and your results are going to be much more immediate, and you're going to be happier in the long run. So I think knowing when to just say, you know what, this is not a DIY scenario. And bed bugs are, I think, the poster example of that.
Agreed. Well, thanks again, Mike, for being here with us. It's always a pleasure to have you with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
If there's any other questions that we can answer for people, feel free to email us or give our office a call, 505-792-8380, Preventive Pest Control. We are happy to answer questions or set you up with some services that might help you out.